We saw a black man and a black woman run the most compelling, progressive campaigns in the history of those states and come within just thousands of votes. And in Georgia, I have to say about my sister Stacey Abrams, who's been a friend of mine for almost a decade now, she knows that seat should have been hers had it not been for voter suppression in Georgia. But don't think for a minute that we didn't win even in those states. Stacey and Andrew Gillum lifted races across the state just like Beto did in Texas, and we won down-ballot races because we were able to show what we as a country, not parties, but we as a country stand for. In all of these races, we finally put an end to the myth of the likely voter, and we went to the truth of every voter. We won in districts that had never even come close before, and we won with women, with people of color, with young people. That is who drove these victories. And let's talk about the ideas that won, because progressive ideas won not only in these races, but also on the ballot. Just imagine that minimum wage, which I introduced the $12 minimum wage bill when I was in the state Senate. We finally got to $13.50 through the ballot initiative. But minimum wage increases, which were called so radical when we passed 15 in Seattle, passed in Missouri and Arizona. Unbelievable. In Medicaid expansion, passing in states across the country, governorships that will control redistricting, passing across the country, taking control of those seats. And so we have big work to do to show that we're going to fight hard to right our country. We have big work to do to push ahead policies that lift up poor people, because poor is not a bad word. It is a word that reflects the reality of a system that has far too long included institutionalized racism, classism, and sexism. And while we talk about working people, we also have to talk about poor people and lifting up and running that poor people's campaign that has been making waves across the country. We have to fight for policies that help people work and earn a decent living so they don't have to work 2 or 3 jobs. Policies that help people to have real workplace democracy and workers' rights on the job. The statistic that haunts me every day is that 62% of Americans don't even have $1,000 in their bank account. Don't even have $1,000 in their bank account. 45% don't even have $400 for an emergency that might happen. And when you think about that, that's a leaky roof. That's a sick mother or child. That is just the life that happens every day. And we have to have policies that help people live life without scraping. We have to have policies like humane immigration reform so that we never rip children from their mothers. We have to have policies that cut prescription drug prices and shore up coverage for those with pre-existing conditions. But more than that, we have to fight for a Medicare for all system so that everybody is covered through health care. That is not a radical idea, by the way. 71% of Americans support Medicare for all. And if you look at every other democracy in the world, every other industrialized country in the world, they have that government-funded healthcare system. We too can do that. We have to push for policies around gun reform and police accountability, just like they mentioned. Thank you for all the work you did on 1639 and 940. Those are tremendous historic policies, and you all helped to make that happen. And by the way, on 1631, I just have to say, they must have been really scared that it was such a good policy to put $31 million into defeating that policy in the last 3 weeks. So I could go on, but what is most important to know, and it's something that FAN knows and has pushed to make real in so many ways, is that we will not win if we do not come together. And when I look across this room, that is what I see. I see this incredible, beautiful coming together of all faiths, all religions, people of deep moral conscience, people who are ready to eliminate any hierarchies of oppression, people who realize that we do win when we push together and we recognize that our movements for economic, social, racial justice are deeply intertwined. We cannot adequately address sexism if we don't also address racism. And we won't address racism if we don't address income and wealth inequality. And we cannot address income inequality if we don't also acknowledge that it is all those whose status is not equal, like the homeless and the mentally ill, undocumented immigrants, refugees, transgender individuals, those with disabilities, people who the system leaves furthest behind. So if we're going to have any hope of coming together and creating those ripples of change, that we have a responsibility to fight for a vision of this country that people are excited about. We have had to be an opposition party for the last couple of years because we were in the minority. But I cannot tell you how happy I am to be moving into the age of the proposition party. We are not an opposition party, we are a proposition party. We have a vision of the country that we are calling people into, and that is what we're going to win with. Putting a hand out and helping people who come up on hard times. Making sure that the profits of work are shared by the workers and not just the shareholders. Recognizing the dignity of all work. Keeping our promises to our seniors by expanding Social Security. An earned benefit program. It is not an entitlement program. It is an earned benefit program that seniors put money into in order to know that they can retire with dignity. Making sure that our trade agreements are fair and not just free. Saying to our kids that we believe in you and we will make sure that college or trade school or vocational schools are free for you, because you know what? If we invest in your future, you will build that future for us and our future generations. Being a country that fights for environmental justice and against climate change so that we all have clean air and clean water and we sustain the planet we love for future generations. We know how big the stakes are. We are close to those forces of hate. And for people that are despondent that we are facing this kind of backlash on things that we thought were settled, like there is no both sides when it comes to white supremacy. I would just say to you what all of you, our moral leaders in this room, already know. And that is, when you are on the precipice of making the most progress, that is when the most backlash occurs. Because you see, there are people who can see that we are moving forward. And there are always, always some people, not everybody, not even a majority, but a small minority of people who don't want that change to happen. And sometimes they are even very powerful. And maybe they occupy some places that we would rather not see. But the very fact that we are seeing the backlash is, strangely enough, how we know we are being successful. That our work is to reject hate and divisiveness. It is long work, and it is not easy, because the same forces that have always been at play to divide us are still today at play. That when people tell us that we are too naive or idealistic, that we think too big, or that we should be practical, that we say back to them, when on earth did anyone achieve anything big by thinking small? Did Sojourner Truth? Did Nelson Mandela? Did Mahatma Gandhi? No, it is our job to think big and to have big ideas about what is possible for our world. We are big thinkers, and if politics is the art of the possible, then it is our job as activists, and yes, I still consider myself an activist. It is our job as activists to push the boundaries of what is possible. So for those of you who have known me for a long time and know my history, you won't be surprised to hear that I'm still doing that every single day in this new role that I have. I never thought that I would be an elected official. I can tell you that very, very honestly. And I certainly never thought I would be the first person of color that this state's Democrats would ever send to Congress. And I am proud of that. And I'm proud of all of that, including that I'm the first South Asian American woman to ever serve and one of only 12 immigrants out of the entire 535 in Congress, people that were actually born outside of the United States and have been naturalized. I'm proud of that. But I should let you do that. But the truth is, I don't want that to be I don't want that to be the case. I am here because of what I want to do, not because of what I want to be. The country that I dream of is a country where we are past all these firsts. A country where everyone has enough and feels like enough. A country where we feel from our very core that generosity and abundance and not scarcity and fear will make us great. A country where people are thriving and not just surviving. That is the America that I know is possible as long as we stand up for it.